You know that feeling. You're out with your friends, the music's blasting, everyone's just having the time of their lives. That was Saturday night on Legian Street in Bali. October 12th, 2002. Backpackers, rugby teams blowing off steam, couples on a dream vacation, just people. Then around 11 p.m., a guy wanders into Paddy's bar wearing a backpack. About 20 seconds later, the world changes. For 202 people, it ends. I've been deep in this story for months, and the thing that gets me, the thing I can't shake, is that what happened that night wasn't an accident. It wasn't even really about Bali. It was a rehearsal. And from their point of view, it was a flawless performance. Look, if you've ever been to Kuta, you know the vibe. Paddy's bar was that classic backpacker spot. You know, sticky floors, cheap beer, and everyone's your best mate after 2 bintangs. Across the alley, the Sari Club was the bigger spot, where you'd go to really dance. And both places were jammed. So this guy walks into Paddy's. Shorts, t-shirt, he could have been anyone, except point of view in his backpack. Now, based on everything they've pieced together, investigators think the first bomb, the suicide vest, was basically bait. Yeah, it killed the bomber and a few people inside, but that wasn't the main point. The real goal was to create panic, to flush everyone out of the bar and onto that one narrow street. And it worked, just like they drew it up. The blast rips through Paddy's. It's not massive, but it's enough. People run. They're choking on dust. Some are bleeding, but mostly they're just confused. And they start trying to help each other. It's just instinct, right? Someone gets hurt. You run to them. So this crowd of helpers and survivors gathers on the street, right next to a white van that's been parked there all evening. Inside that van is over a ton of explosives, a literal ton, packed with nails, ball bearings, anything that could fly, and it was parked for maximum effect. The second blast, man, it didn't just explode, it vaporized. It erased a 30-meter circle of everything, of the club, of the street, of every single person standing there. That 20-second delay, that was the genius of it, and the horror of it. They weren't just guessing. They knew how people would react. They counted on our instinct to help. It's sick, but you have to admit, it's terrifyingly smart. David Spike Wellington was there with the Coogee Dolphins, his rugby team. Just a bunch of guys celebrating the end of their season. He died in that second blast, along with 5 of his teammates. The heat from the fire was so intense, it melted the van's engine into a lump of metal. The sound shattered windows 5 miles away. In less than a minute, a party turned into a war zone. And believe it or not, that wasn't even the end of it. There was a third bomb. Okay, so when you see that kind of destruction, your mind goes to military-grade stuff, right? C4, government black ops, has to be. Something this powerful must have come out of some high-tech weapons lab. Nope. The main ingredient that killed 202 people? Fertilizer. Seriously, it was mostly potassium chlorate, the kind of stuff you can buy at a farm supply store. You just mix in some aluminum powder for fuel, a little sulfur, and you've got something that can level a city block. But this is where it gets crazy. This wasn't just a bucket bomb. The way they engineered this thing was, elegant feels like the wrong word, but from a technical standpoint, it was brilliant. They packed the explosive mix into a dozen filing cabinets to direct the blast. They loaded it with shrapnel. And then And this is the signature move. They supercharged it. They used military-grade TNT and PETN detonating cord to kick the homemade stuff into overdrive. It's like they took a Honda Civic but dropped a Ferrari engine into it. They turned something basic into an absolute monster. An investigator on the scene later called the design elegant in its simplicity, which is basically cop speak for, we have no idea who we're dealing with, and that scares the hell out of us. And the van's placement? They'd done their homework. They'd scouted traffic patterns. They'd mapped the street. They knew exactly where to park it to kill the most people. And that third bomb I mentioned, a small one, went off outside the US consulate. It barely made the news, but it wasn't random. It was a signature, a calling card. So you have to ask, who does this? Who has the engineering know-how, the military tactics, and the absolute lack of a soul to design a system that weaponizes human compassion? Well, finding that out is where the story takes a turn. Imagine being a cop in Denpasar the next morning. You're standing in the middle of the worst terrorist attack in your country's history. The world's media is screaming at you. Families are desperate for answers. And you've got nothing. Zero. And then, a forensics tech finds something impossible. Two things, actually. Two little miracles in the rubble. First, fused into a piece of wreckage, they find the van's chassis number. Somehow, it's still readable. That gives them a paper trail. Second, in the crater itself, they find tiny fragments of a Nokia phone, the trigger. And on one of those fragments is the phone's serial number, a digital fingerprint. Back then, you needed an ID to buy a phone. So that serial number led them to a shop. The shop led them to a name, and the name led them to a guy named Amrozi, living in a quiet village in East Java, probably thinking he'd just pulled off the perfect crime. Turns out, Amrozi's tradecraft was a joke. He left clues everywhere. And when the cops finally kicked in his door, the dude just smiled for the cameras, grinning, not scared, proud. But Amrozi was just the guy who bought the van. The guys pulling the strings were still out there. Imam Samudra, the computer guy who planned the attack like it was a software launch. And Ali Gufran, who went by Mukhlas. He was the spiritual leader, the one who gave the orders. These weren't screaming fanatics. They were quiet, methodical, and totally convinced that killing 200 tourists was an act of holy war. And get this, while the whole world was focused on catching these three, the man who actually built the bomb was already designing the next one, Dr. Azahari Hussein, a Malaysian engineer with a PhD, a professional. This guy didn't learn this on the internet. He knew industrial explosives inside and out. And he was already in a safe house somewhere, sketching out plans for round two. Because for them, October 2002 was just the beginning. All right, this is where the official story starts to fray at the edges, where it gets a little weird. We're told Jemaah Islamiyah was just a regional extremist group. And sure, the official line has answers for their skills. A lot of these guys were veterans of the war in Afghanistan. They'd been trained in camps by the Mujahideen. That explains some of it. But it doesn't explain all of it. Not by a long shot. Just think about it for a second. How does a group like that suddenly get good enough to build bombs that impress Western intelligence agencies? How do they coordinate across borders with operational security that stumps agencies with billion-dollar budgets? The official answer is basically, they got smart. Which, okay, maybe. But there are some serious questions that answer doesn't cover, like Dr. Azahari. a PhD level engineer. Where does that kind of expertise suddenly come from? And the money. An operation like this costs a fortune. Safe houses, cars, bomb materials, months of planning. Are we really supposed to believe they funded all that by robbing a jewelry store and passing a collection plate at a mosque? Really? Talk to intelligence analysts off the record, and they'll tell you. There were other fingerprints on this. Not a country, necessarily, but an international network. One with deep pockets and its own agenda. The problem is, proving it became impossible, because every time investigators got close to the men at the top, those men had a habit of dying. Over the next decade, the masterminds were hunted down, one by one. Azahari, killed in a police shootout in 2005. Dalmatin, the electronics whiz, eliminated in a raid, 2010. Norden M. Top, the guy coordinating the next wave of attacks. Same story. The official narrative is a success story. Indonesia's elite anti-terror squads won. Justice was served at the barrel of a gun. But it's a very neat and tidy ending, isn't it? The top bomb makers never faced a trial. They never gave public testimony. We just have a string of bloody shootouts that permanently silence the only men who knew the whole truth. And what really bothers me is that the playbook they perfected in Bali didn't die with them. That style of attack, targeting soft, civilian places, using a small bomb to herd people towards a bigger one, it became a case study for terror groups all over the world. You see echoes of it everywhere. So, was Bali just a bunch of local guys who got lucky and really good at building bombs? Or was it something else? A laboratory maybe? A testing ground for tactics that were always designed to go global. 23 years on, we're no closer to knowing. I want to tell you about a woman named Chusnul Chotima. She was working at a little food stall near the Sari Club that night. The blast threw her 30 feet through the air. She was burned over 60% of her body. Since that night, she has had 47 surgeries, and she's still not done. That's the thing about these kinds of injuries that no one tells you about. They're not like a broken bone that heals. The mix of blast pressure, the intense heat, the shrapnel, it does something to the body that creates problems for life. Organs that seem fine just give out years later. Scar tissue breaks down. And right now, literally, today, in 2025, Chusnul is out there leading protests because the government wants to cut funding for long-term victim care. 23 years later, the survivors are still in a fight for their lives. And the families, they carry a different kind of damage. As one victim's mother said on the first anniversary, the passage of time has not eased the grief of losing a son. That was on year 1. Imagine what year 23 feels like. But here's the one thing the bombers never could have planned for. Instead of driving people apart, this act of hate created connections that are incredibly strong. The Coogee Dolphins didn't just fold. They created a memorial that brings people together every single year. Survivors, families, even strangers who just feel they need to be there. Every anniversary, Balinese Hindus and Indonesian Muslims hold prayer services together, a quiet refusal to let anyone use this tragedy to divide them. And that memorial, where Paddy's bar used to be, it's not just a sad place. People go there to mourn, sure, but they also go there to try and make sense of it all, to wonder why they survived when so many others didn't. Look, the physical scars are still healing. The court cases are mostly done. The men who did this are dead or behind bars. But those other questions, the ones about how safe we really are, about what justice even means, about how quickly your world can just vanish, those are still wide open. Because every time you stand in a line at airport security, or see a guard outside a hotel, or just feel a little flicker of hesitation before walking into a crowded place, you're feeling the aftershock of those 20 seconds on Legian Street. The bombs in Bali didn't just change Indonesia, they changed our shared understanding of what it means to be safe in the world. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. In a few weeks, they'll gather again at that memorial in Kuta. They'll read the names, they'll release the doves, and they'll try to find meaning in something that has none. But somewhere else in the world, right now, someone is mixing fertilizer and aluminum powder. They're studying crowd maps. They're planning their own 20 seconds. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And will we be ready when it happens?